It was a grey afternoon in Hong Kong, the kind of day when the city's heartbeat slowed just enough for people to notice their own thoughts. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the streets slick and shining like mirrors. Inside a small corner café on Nathan Road, the air smelled of coffee, sugar, and something deeper. Tension waiting to happen. Bruce sat at a table by the window, wearing a plain white shirt, sipping jasmine tea in silence. He wasn't Bruce Lee the legend that day. He was just a man taking a quiet break from the world. His eyes wandered to the raindrops still clinging to the glass, watching the rhythm of the street, the flow of strangers, the poetry of the ordinary. He loved moments like that, moments when life didn't ask for performance. Behind the counter, May, a young waitress barely in her 20s, balanced plates with grace that came from necessity, not training. Her smile was gentle but tired, the kind of smile people wear when they need to be strong for too long. Bruce noticed it but didn't intrude. Everyone fights their own battles in silence, he thought. Then the door swung open. 2 men stumbled in, loud, laughing, already half drunk. They were factory workers from down the road, the kind who spent all day being ordered around and all night trying to prove they were in control somewhere. Their boots hit the floor heavy, their voices breaking the calm like a storm entering a chapel. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called out. "Bring us 2 coffees, and bring that smile with it." The other laughed, a low, mocking sound that made May's shoulders tighten. She nodded quickly, whispering, "Yes, sir," the words soft but cracked around the edges. Bruce watched without reaction, his cup still in his hand. His stillness wasn't ignorance, it was discipline. A man who knows what he can do doesn't need to announce it. When May placed their cups on the table, one of the men grabbed her wrist. "Don't rush off," he said, grinning. "We just want to talk." Her face froze for a second before she forced another fragile smile. "Please, I have other customers." "Other customers can wait," the man interrupted. "You think you're too good to talk to us?" The cafe fell silent. Even the old ceiling fan seemed to slow down, as if afraid to make a sound. Bruce's eyes lifted from his tea. There was no anger in them, only focus, like the calm before thunder. May tried to pull her hand away, but the man tightened his grip. "I said stay." His tone was playful on the surface, but poison underneath. She looked around for help. No one moved. People avoided her eyes. Fear is contagious, and courage is rare. Bruce set his cup down quietly. He stood, not fast, not slow, just with the inevitability of a rising tide. The men didn't notice at first, too busy with their own cruelty. When his shadow fell across the table, they finally looked up. "What's your problem?" one of them barked, defensive now that someone had dared to interrupt. Bruce's expression didn't change. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Let her go." The man laughed, assuming he had found an easy target. "And who are you, huh? Her bodyguard? Sit down before you get hurt." Bruce tilted his head slightly, as if studying a puzzle. "If I sit down," he said, "you'll hurt her. If I stand, you'll hurt yourself." The cafe held its breath. The man stood up, slamming his cup down, spilling coffee across the table. "You think you're funny?" Bruce didn't move. His silence was louder than any threat. The other man joined in, circling slightly, trying to look brave in front of the small audience. "Tell you what," the first one said, stepping closer. "Why don't you sit back down and mind your own—" Before the last word left his mouth, something happened so fast that no one could later describe it properly. Bruce's hand moved once, just once, and the man's wrist released May as if burned. The drunk stumbled back, clutching his arm, confusion written across his face. There was no visible strike, no dramatic fight, just stillness, precision, and a lesson learned in silence. Bruce's eyes softened as he turned to May. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded quickly, holding her wrist, trying to hide the tears threatening to fall. The second man looked at his friend, then at Bruce, realizing too late who he was dealing with. You're, he stammered. Bruce shook his head before the words came out. "No names," he said, "just respect." The 2 men left without another word, their pride broken more cleanly than their bones. The cafe slowly came back to life, chairs scraping, whispers spreading like wind through leaves. May whispered, "Thank you." Bruce smiled faintly. Don't thank me, he said. Thank yourself for not letting fear teach you silence. He placed a few bills on the table, more than enough to cover his tea, and walked out into the street. The rain had started again, soft and forgiving. Behind him, the city continued its rhythm, unaware that something small but powerful had just taken place. A reminder that real strength is never loud, and true courage never needs to be seen to be felt. The story should have ended there, just another afternoon in Hong Kong, a small act of justice forgotten by nightfall. But courage has a strange way of echoing. What happens quietly in one corner of the world can shake the hearts of those who hear it. By the next morning, the tale of the calm man in the café had already begun to spread. The waitress, May, hadn't told anyone directly. She simply mentioned it to her brother, who worked at a repair shop across the harbour. By lunch, the story was told again, this time louder, and by evening, people were adding details they couldn't possibly know. Some said the man had caught the bully's punch in mid-air. Others said he made them apologize on their knees. No one mentioned the truth, that the most powerful thing he did that day was remain calm. Bruce, meanwhile, had returned to his normal rhythm, training early, teaching his students, reflecting in silence. He never cared for rumors. Fame was a noise he had learned to turn down. But when he walked through the market, later that week, he could feel the eyes following him, half admiration, half curiosity. He smiled faintly. People always preferred legends over lessons. Inside his dojo, a group of students waited, eager as ever. Among them was a young boy named Jian, barely 16, whose fire burned hotter than his discipline could contain. When Bruce entered, the room fell silent, not out of fear, but respect. He bowed slightly, his movements deliberate, every gesture a lesson. "Before we begin," Bruce said, "tell me what you've heard." The students exchanged glances until Jian spoke up. "Sensei, they say you beat 2 men in a cafe with just one move." The others nodded, eyes bright, waiting for confirmation. Bruce smiled, not proudly, but with quiet disappointment. "That's what they say, huh?" he replied. "And what do you think I did?" Jian hesitated. "You stopped them." Bruce nodded. "Stopped them, yes, but not with fists." Another student frowned. "But you did something. They were hurting a woman." "Yes," Bruce said softly, "and sometimes the best way to stop violence is not by fighting, but by reminding others that they have already lost their humanity." The room stayed silent. Even the air seemed to pause to listen. Bruce walked slowly among them, his voice low but steady. "Remember this. A fight begins long before the first punch. It begins the moment you let anger become your teacher. I did not strike that man to hurt him. I struck the fear that was controlling him." Jian looked puzzled. "Fear? He was drunk, Sensei." "He was—" Bruce stopped and turned toward him. "Drunkenness is only another mask for fear," he said. "The fear of being unseen, the fear of being small. The moment you understand your enemy's fear, he stops being your enemy." The lesson settled deep into the air. Then Bruce gestured toward the practice mats. "Now, show me your form." The students began their drills, feet whispering against the floor, the rhythm of movement blending discipline and grace. Bruce corrected their stances with gentle touches, the way a craftsman shapes a sculpture. Every motion had purpose, every pause a meaning. As they trained, the door slid open. May stood there holding a small paper bag. Her presence startled the students. She looked out of place among warriors in training gear. Bruce motioned for her to come closer. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said shyly. "I just wanted to thank you properly." She held out the bag. Inside were sweet rice cakes, still warm. "You didn't need to," Bruce replied, smiling. "I wanted to," she said softly. "Because that day, you didn't just help me. You reminded me I had a voice." Bruce accepted the gift with both hands. "Then I'm honored," he said. The students watched quietly, sensing that something sacred was happening, a kind of strength they couldn't yet name. When May left, Jian whispered, "Sensei, why didn't you tell her who you are? She still doesn't know." Bruce looked at the boy, amused. "What would that change? She'd know you're Bruce Lee." He laughed quietly. "Names fade, Jian. What matters is the act. The world doesn't need to know who did good. It only needs to see that good can still be done. Jian lowered his eyes, realizing he had much to learn beyond kicks and strikes. Bruce turned toward the window, watching the rain begin again, tracing patterns down the glass. Outside, in the crowded city, his story kept moving, bending, growing, changing shape as people retold it. And somewhere, in a café filled with strangers, someone would repeat his words. Real strength is quiet, real courage is kind. The whisper had become a wave. A few days later, the city's pulse quickened again. The story of the calm man in the café had grown into something mythic. Street vendors spoke of him between customers. Taxi drivers swapped versions at red lights. Some said he was a monk. Others swore he was a ghost, a spirit of justice walking among men. Bruce heard the whispers wherever he went, but ignored them all. He had learned long ago that fame is a shadow that grows larger the farther you walk from the light. Still, rumors attract attention, and attention brings challenge. That morning, while he was closing the dojo, a group of young fighters appeared at his door. 3 men in their 20s, strong, proud, burning with something that looked like confidence but smelled like insecurity. "You're the one from the cafe?" the tallest asked, his tone half respectful, half mocking. Bruce studied him calmly. "I am the one who was drinking tea." They laughed, taking it as arrogance. "We heard you think you can stop anyone without fighting. Maybe show us how, master." Bruce sighed softly. "Do you want to learn, or do you just want to win?" The leader smirked. "Winning is learning." Bruce shook his head. "No. Winning teaches the ego, losing teaches the soul." That line hung in the air like incense smoke. But they were young. Too young to understand that humility is heavier than pride. The leader stepped forward. "Let's see if your philosophy can block a punch." Bruce didn't move. He didn't even raise his guard. "You've already thrown it," he said. The man hesitated. "What?" "The moment you decided to prove yourself, you lost peace. That's the real defeat." For a moment, the fighter looked confused, unsure whether to attack or walk away. But pride, as always, whispered louder than wisdom. He charged. And then, it happened again. No flash, no roar, just movement so fluid it looked like breathing. Bruce shifted slightly to the side, guiding the man's arm past him, letting momentum do the punishment pride deserved. The fighter stumbled, landing hard but not hurt. Bruce looked down at him. "You see? The body moves only where the mind allows. Change the thought, and you change the fight." The others hesitated now, realizing this wasn't about strength. It was about control, something far rarer. Still, one of them, ashamed to retreat, lunged forward. Bruce moved like water, barely touching him, redirecting his force until both of them were standing exactly where they had started. It looked less like combat, more like a dance. Then Bruce did something unexpected. He bowed. "To fight without reason is to betray the gift of movement," he said. "To use skill without wisdom is to lose twice." Silence filled the dojo. The young men lowered their heads, the arrogance draining away like rain down a gutter. "We just wanted to see if the stories were true," the tallest murmured. "They are not," Bruce said. "Stories exaggerate. Truth humbles." He offered his hand, helping the fallen man to his feet. "Now, if you truly wish to learn, come back tomorrow, but leave your pride at the door." They bowed and left, carrying something heavier than Bruce's understanding. Bruce closed the dojo, locking it behind him as the sun began to set. He walked through the narrow streets of Kowloon, feeling the pulse of the city again, the horns, the shouts, the laughter of life. Every face he passed reminded him of something he'd once said to himself. "Be like water, my friend. Soft enough to flow, strong enough to carve stone." When he turned a corner, he saw a familiar sight. The same cafe, its lights warm against the evening rain. Inside, May was serving customers, her movements calm and sure. But this time, something had changed. When a group of noisy men entered, she didn't shrink back. She met their eyes, spoke firmly, and kept control. They listened. They respected her space. Bruce smiled quietly, unseen from outside. That was the victory he cared about, not applause, not fame, but transformation. strength teaching strength, courage teaching courage. As he walked away, the city seemed softer somehow, like a student finally beginning to understand its lesson. He thought of the world as one endless dojo. Every soul training in patience, every moment a chance to master the art of being human. But destiny wasn't done with him yet. Because the next morning, a letter would arrive at his door, sealed in red wax, stamped with a symbol from his past. A symbol he hadn't seen since the day he left the United States. It would be the beginning of a test far greater than any physical fight. A challenge not of muscle, but of heart. When Bruce opened his door that morning, the letter lay there like a shadow from another life. The red wax bore the mark of the Dragon School, his old training ground in Seattle, where his philosophy had first been questioned, challenged, misunderstood. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in elegant strokes. A student of yours has forgotten your lesson. He challenges you to remember what you once taught him, and what you may have forgotten yourself. It was signed simply, David Chang. Bruce stared at the name for a long time. David had been one of his first disciples, gifted, fierce, but consumed by the hunger to dominate. Bruce had warned him once, "A man who fights for pride is already defeated." David had smiled and said, "Then I will never lose." That was years ago. Now it seemed the past had come back, not with anger, but with invitation. 3 days later, Bruce arrived at the old gym in Mongkok where the challenge was set. It wasn't public. There were no reporters, no lights, no trophies. Only 2 men, a few witnesses, and the quiet echo of respect. David stood in the center, taller now, broader, the years having carved lines of both discipline and bitterness into his face. When he saw Bruce, he bowed stiffly. "I didn't think you'd come." Bruce smiled. "You called." "I answered." They faced each other in silence. For a moment, the air felt heavy, not with hatred, but with history. David spoke first. "Do you know why I challenged you?" "To prove something," Bruce replied. "To me or to yourself?" David's jaw tightened. "To remind the world what real martial arts look like. You turned it into philosophy." Bruce nodded. "Because without philosophy, fists are just noise." "Then let's see whose noise speaks louder." The fight began, if one could call it that. David attacked with precision, speed, and power that would have overwhelmed almost anyone else. But Bruce moved with something different. Not faster, not harder, just freer. Each strike met emptiness. Each kick met air. It was like trying to hit a reflection in water. Minutes passed, sweat glistened. The sound of breath replaced the sound of blows. Finally, David swung with all his might. One last, desperate attempt to break the calm that mocked him. Bruce stepped aside, gently guided the arm down, and with one precise motion, disarmed both his balance and his rage. David fell to one knee, gasping, not from pain but realization. Bruce stood still, breathing evenly. "Do you see it now?" David looked up, his eyes wet, not from defeat but truth. "You never wanted to win." Bruce shook his head. "Winning ends the moment. Understanding continues the journey." He helped David up, just as he had helped the young fighter days before. "Go teach," Bruce said quietly. "Not how to fight, but how to see." David bowed deeply. For the first time, not as a rival, but as a student reborn. That night, Bruce returned once more to the café. The streets hummed with neon light, and the smell of rain mixed with roasted coffee. May spotted him through the crowd and smiled. A real smile this time, no longer cautious or tired. "Tea, as always?" she asked. Bruce nodded, taking the same seat by the window. The world outside moved fast. Cars, people, time itself. But inside, there was peace. When May brought the tea, she said, "People still talk about what you did here." He chuckled softly. "Then they miss the point." "What was the point?" she asked. He looked into the steaming cup, watching the ripples settle. "That power means nothing," he said, "if it doesn't bring peace to the one who holds it, and that courage means everything when it's used to protect, not to prove." She smiled, and for a moment the noise of the world faded away. Bruce raised the cup in quiet respect, to her, to the city, to every unseen act of kindness that keeps humanity alive. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance, like applause from the heavens. And somewhere, in 100 cafes and schools and homes, his story continued. Changed, retold, exaggerated, but never forgotten. Because truth, like water, always finds its way. Real strength is not in the hand that strikes, but in the heart that forgives. True courage is not facing enemies, but facing one's own pride. If this story touched you, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Not for fame, but to spread one simple truth. Kindness is power. When was the last time you used your strength to protect someone instead of proving yourself?